Today, I'm going to talk about how to set up your microphones and get the best out of what you've got. Hey, I'm Steve Smith, aka Steve in the Mix, and ever since I was a teenager, I've been using microphones to record vocals, guitars, drums, bass. I've even done strings, brass, and eventually worked my way up into recording a lot of things that were on records. So I've got 4 essential things that I think you should consider when you're setting up your microphone. Plus, I'm going to add 2 essential pieces of gear so that you can get the most out of your microphone. So I'm sitting down here just because I want to make the point that 1, there's lots of microphones, and 2, that they're delicate. So I wouldn't have all these microphones up and just juggling them. This is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. It's got a Neumann capsule in it. It was handmade for me by a guy named Dave Perlman. It's been a great mic. It sounds a lot like a U47. In here, classic U87. Now, I'm pretty lucky. I got some nice microphones here. You might have something like that, and that's okay. Creativity is more important than the gear you're using. The point I want to try and make today is just leveling up with what you've got so that you can just extract the most good sound of whatever piece of gear you have. So I've got 3 P's and an A in the 4 points that I'm going to talk to you about today. So let me throw this thing up on a mic stand and we'll talk about, number 1, polar pattern, and talk about how that's going to affect what you're doing. Cardioid means that it's going to hear best from, it's usually the side with the emblem on it, so it's going to hear best from that side and hear less from the back. Figure 8 means it's going to hear really well on this side, really well on this side, but here and here it's not going to hear so well. And omni means it's going to hear equally all the way around. For home recording, almost always you're going to want to be in cardioid pattern for 2 reasons. 1, you get more proximity effect. In other words, the closer you get a more full sound. That's more pronounced, so you can adjust your sound by moving the distance between whatever you're recording and the microphone. And also, because it doesn't hear so well in the back, you can really tone down sounds that you don't want. So I have a computer with a fan in it that makes just a little bit of noise, and I have an air conditioner, and I find that if I make sure that the air conditioner and the computer and the fan are in areas that are off center to the back of this particular microphone, I have another one that's very similar, I don't hear them in the recording. Now the air conditioner has to be in just fan only mode. Your situation obviously might be a little bit different, but the point is you can really minimize the audio garbage if you position this the right way in your room. So let's get this mic set up. Off the script, tip number 1. Something to think about is keeping your mic in its case. A really well-known mic tech told me one time, if you were to design a dust collector, it would look an awful lot like the capsule inside of a microphone. And that's what we do first. The mic stand, the mic clip, and then this. And the reason why is because if you put the microphone in last and plug it in, you're much more likely to not drop it as you're messing around with the other stuff. And as I mentioned, they're fragile. So let's take care of these guys. So the next point, our second P, is placement in the room. You might be really surprised at how the microphone sounds different when you move it over. So in my space here, I've got some treatment on the ceiling, and I found for doing vocals in the middle of the room under one of the treatments works really well. It sounds different as you move it around, and you'd be really surprised at like the reverb you hear in the room. So my room is designed so that it's more dead up on this end and it gets liver. If I record a vocal about halfway down and there's a little bit of liveness to it, I mean just a touch, it tends to sound a little bit more natural to me. Now that's not saying you can really hear a lot of space or a lot of room, but there tends to be just something about it I like. So you have to experiment by actually just physically like move it over here, move it over here, move it over here. Now if you're confined, you might not be able to do so much about it, but if you have a little bit of room, try different spots in your room and you might find that it makes a real difference. I just want to tell you a real quick story about placement. So I was recording drums one day in a room that wasn't so big, and I had the drums sort of close to the wall, maybe about 2 or 3 feet away, and I just couldn't get any bottom end out of one of the drums. and I thought, oh, that's interesting, kind of surprising. I moved it over like this much away from the wall, so obviously there was a standing wave that was canceling, so the drum sounded fantastic just by moving it that much. So really be aware that small movements and placement in the room can make a tremendous difference. Let's talk about proximity effect. So as you get closer to the microphone, you should be hearing that the sound changes bigger and fuller sounding. Away from it, it starts to get thinner. Some would say clearer, but sometimes it's thinner. So the point is, you need to experiment with that a little bit and find the right spot for your voice. Now, sometimes if a singer's really blasting, they need to take a step back, maybe not too far, but a little bit. Point is that it makes a real difference whatever you're recording. If you're doing acoustic instruments, don't be scared to go pretty far back, like 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 feet sometimes, but really, really listen to what it sounds like. You find if you get too close to stringed instruments, guitars, violins, cellos, whatever, you get too close, it doesn't really sound like the instrument anymore. It tends to sound too woofy, and you don't capture the resonance of the instrument that you really want to. Proximity makes a big difference. You got to experiment and listen. Okay, we're on to the A, axis. Axis is A-X-I-S, not, okay, the other one. When you sing straight onto a microphone, it has a different sound than when you get off to the side of the microphone. So the pattern of the mic might change how loud the mic is hearing the sound, but it also acts kind of like an EQ. So if I move to the side of the microphone, you should probably hear that my voice, that the sound of it is changing. So with vocals, you don't tend to go off axis, although it can help with someone's voice who is like a little bit too sibilant, a little bit too bright. There's too much really high end coming through. It can help with that, but also with things like guitars especially, or guitar amps, trying off axis can deliver a sort of more mid-rangey, fuller sound and dial back the brights a little bit, and sometimes you might want that. So just be aware that axis is going to affect the sound, and you can use that to your advantage when you're doing the actual recording. I just put up another microphone because I want to highlight just a couple things, how the difference in microphones, they don't all react the same. So that's why you have to do whatever you're going to do with your own microphone. If I get really close and if I back up, you can hear that the changes in this microphone are different than the changes that you'd hear in the other microphone that I just had up. And then I want to highlight one other thing. So one mistake I see people making is they sing into a microphone the wrong way. So this one you sing into the end. Maybe that's obvious, but I see people set up a microphone like this the same way, where actually that would be completely off axis and that would be in the low reception zone. So this microphone would be set up like this or like this. You can see the capsule in there. So with your microphone, just make sure that you're singing into the right part, because if you're treating this microphone like this one, and say you were singing into the side of it, if it was pointing up, you would get a really, really different sound. So let's be careful with that. Okay, let's get into the extra pieces of gear I'm talking about. It seems really obvious, but a lot of people just buy a microphone and they hold it when they're recording. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because you can't get the specific place that you really want the microphone in relation to the singer or the instrument. So piece of gear number one is the good old-fashioned mic stand. Get a mic stand so that you can put the mic very specifically where it sounds best. If you're recording like an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar with the speaker, moving this thing by that much can make a dramatic difference in what the sound is. So you got to be really specific about where the mic is, and don't be afraid to move it around. But once you find that spot, you've got to be consistent and make sure it stays there. If you're recording an acoustic guitar, a lot of times an acoustic guitar player will play, and then they'll have the habit of, you're talking about the parts, and they'll adjust and they'll turn a little bit or move for the next recording, and then the sound is different. So be really, really careful that however you set up, you keep really consistent with that. Last piece of gear, popper stopper. So this stops plosives, the explosive sounds of P's, B's, and breath going into the microphone. That can be a real problem. It goes up here like that. You just connect it to the mic stand. My starting place is about a fist away from the microphone. Now, that's not the answer for everything, but it tends to be my starting place. It creates a nice little barrier for the singer. It's a really good way to enhance the sound for a cheap price. These things are lots of times $30 or less. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to add this to your arsenal. Get the most out of your microphone by spending that extra 30 bucks and by buying that mic stand. So today we talked about polar pattern, the direction that the mic hears in. We talked about placement, where in the room it is. It has a bigger effect than you think. We talked about proximity, how close or far away you are from the mic. And we talked about access. Is the mic pointing at the thing it's recording, or is it turned a little bit? It can kind of act like an EQ. Now, I really want to encourage you, no matter what you have, get the best out of it. You can level up later, you can save up your money, you can get something a little nicer down the road. Creativity beats gear every time. So I would encourage you to just move forward. Don't wait until you have a magical piece of gear before you get creative. Start putting your ideas down. Your recording skills, your songwriting skills, your track skills, whatever it is, will only get better if you actually do it. I'd love to leave you with a couple of thoughts. If you've already discovered any of these things, if you would please share them so that other people can benefit from your experience, that would be awesome. Please leave a comment about what you've discovered, maybe even mention what microphone you're using, and share with us a story about how you got it to reject a fan noise, or you found that singing this far away from it worked really, really well for you. If you're recording, being creative, and putting yourself out there, I've got nothing but respect for you. Please tap that subscribe button. I'm going to be sharing everything I know about recording and the creative process, and we're going to talk a little bit of business too.